I'm John Bowden, and we talked to 4 ex-singers in the band Chicago. Peter Cetera, Jason Scheff, Bill Champlin, Jeff Coffey, and their current lead singer, Neil Donnell. The ups and downs of being in a rock and roll band. Some memories are happy memories, but to Chicago's defense, they've been around for a long time. They have a lot of ex-members. A lot of people came and went. And it's like a long marriage. You know, if you saw the Chicago documentary a few years ago, I kind of felt bad after watching it because the band members had some pretty choice things to say about their ex-members. And that documentary was done by a then band member, Lou Pardini, his nephew. So it was heavily biased and really showed one side of the conversation. Many fans were not happy with that. And it was kind of a stain on documentary filmmaker Peter Pardini. So in some ways, it was really not a documentary. But again, to the defense of Chicago, band members go and sometimes they're just burnt out or they just want to hang out with you anymore. And there's bad feelings and it happens a lot in rock and roll bands. So in this, you're going to hear some really pleasant memories of Chicago, as mentioned, and some not so much. And remember, this is their opinion. We didn't reach out to Robert Lamb or Jimmy Pankow or the other guys for their opinions or reactions to the opinions that are displayed on this video. Enjoy.
Well, basically, I felt it was time that I was given more recognition for the work that I did do with the group, production-wise, point-wise, how much money I was making from an album, co-production credits, because I was doing all that work, but I wasn't getting recognized for it, nor the credit. And the group basically didn't want to give me the credit, And I felt that was kind of selfish. I was doing the majority of the writing and the singing and the work and everything. And I felt kind of at that point, they kind of made me an ultimatum about going on the road, and I didn't want to go on the road. I wanted to do albums, and we both came to the conclusion that maybe it was time for us to go our separate ways. Yeah, it was a mutual thing. They wanted to tour, and I wanted to do a solo album. So it was kind of the way it went.
When I came in, along with, I think a lot of people thought, this is never going to work. I'm sorry. How do you replace an icon like Peter Cetera? And you're standing next to Bill Champlin and Robert Lamb. But
Robert fought for you, right? Robert fought for you, didn't he?
He sure did, man. I mean, I'll never be able to thank him enough. And they all really did, but Robert specifically, and I thanked Foster for this, man, and he's gotten uncomfortable. I said, no, David, this is good. You need your butt kicked to see what you're made of, man, and to walk in on day one of Chicago 18 and thinking, okay, David was not thrilled, and I don't blame him. The demos we turned in, this is not going to blow your mind of Peter Cetera's replacement, but something happened at the microphone on day one, and I thought, okay, here's the one and done. But when the red light went on, as Champlin always said, and I heard the music and Humberto's mix in my headphones, I'm telling you, John, from the first line, I thought, I'm up and running, man. And it sounded so good. And I get chills even talking about this. Every line just got better and like more confident. And by the end of that first take, Foster had his head in his hands and he looked up and he goes, you just blew my mind. But then you knew you would. And we sailed through that record.
You didn't have to audition, did you? Or did you have to audition for Chicago?
No, I mean, I had written a song with Danny. Sunny Think Twice was the name of the song. And because I'd met Danny some other time doing something else. And Danny was, he was digging where the song was going. And I went up to the rehearsal hall, which happened to be at Danny's house. It was his recording studio. And they were rehearsing, and I heard most of the material they were planning on doing for the next record. I just went, this ain't gonna fly. There's nothing here. It's a little self-indulgent. And Danny called me one day and said, what do you think would be happening if we got David Foster as a producer? And I said, dude, you'll probably have to throw away everything you got except maybe Sunny Think Twice, and I'm not even sure about that. Mm-hmm. And David's going to have to get in on the writing because he ain't going to do it with the songs that I heard. And they had a talk, and that's the way it came down. So David started cutting the record with them, started cutting tracks with them, and he started writing with Peter and with Jim. And it started to happen. The music was starting to get better. I mean, 16 was a little more band oriented. 17 was just pop city all the way around.
I think probably "If You Leave Me Now" was one of them, and that was because that was our first #1 song in the world, and I'm proud of that song. "Hard to Say I'm Sorry" is kind of another milestone because that was kind of like our comeback, let's say. "Save the Night," I think I'm very proud of because that was a total. Nobody expected that song to come from Chicago, and I think the video was wonderful on that. So there are songs like that are different milestones that I kind of judge the whole thing on.
It's that moment I love to tell kids and up and comers, don't worry about it so much. It's going to happen or not. And you can talk yourself into, it's fate. It's either supposed to happen or it isn't. So at any rate, how cool is it that all these years later, I get to hear from people like Jay DeMarcus of Rascal Flatts, Arnel Pineda, that tell me that I was the guy that inspired them to do what they do. Arnel, said, you're the guy. We met him in 2015, I think it was, or no, the beginning of 2016, we were over in the Philippines, and Robert, Jimmy, and Lee, the whole band was sitting around, but particularly those guys, original members, and they were looking at Arnel and said, man, it's so great what you've done, accomplished. And he pointed right at me and said, it's because of him. He showed me what's possible. How cool is that? Right?
Yeah.
So anyway.
He's working it night after night in that band, that's for sure. Between 16 and 17, to you personally, what was the vibe going into 16 as opposed to going into Chicago 17?
Well, I think 16, they really felt like, okay, we're going to get it going. I mean, it was kind of weird right then. They did it kind of out of their own money, did it out of their own pension funds. There was no deal when they did 16. So they got me in there, but it wasn't like it was already going on. They were signed as manager to Howard Kaufman, and which means Irving Azov at some level. All that was all going on and all happening, but they were kind of we're just going to do this on the fly and see what happens. And now once the first roughs came in, Warner Brothers or what was it, Reprise, somebody over there jumped on it like with both feet. They would, whoa, this is going to fly. So things started to happen. But I think they just took a chance.
That's exactly right. That one came along when, that's what makes you feel vindictive, I mean, you just want to take some fresh melon and just wipe it in the face of those critics, that just totally wrote us off, The fact of the matter is they were right, and we weren't really paying attention to what we were doing, and so it took an enormous shakeup to get us back on top, and that song was definitely kind of vindicated us.
See, the end of 16, right, it looked like it was done and over, and then David and Peter wrote "Hard to Say I'm Sorry," and they put it on the record, and that just flew like crazy. I think that was the only single off of that record, off of 16, but it really set up 17 like a monster. And I'm sure that, I mean, I don't know whether David had conversations with Chicago management, but it really started going in. This is really going to be the album that Foster and Cetera really tear it up. And they did.
Oh, yeah. You're the inspiration is definitely, when a song means something to me as a songwriter, I just think it means a lot to somebody else because it's a basic feeling. Kind of saying something to somebody else that you don't really know how to say it, and when you hear a song that, hey, you know what? That's exactly the way I feel about you, I mean, that means a lot to me when people say that.
You didn't want to be a sideman, right? You wanted to be a member of the band.
I wouldn't be a sideman. Not at that time. I just had a record out. I mean, I was, Runaway had been out for 2 weeks when I joined that band. But I could, like I say, I could tell Joe Smith signed me. He's gone. Nobody even knows that I've got a record out on Elektra Records. So I went, this offer came in, and I went, okay. And I told Dan, when Danny called me, he said, we want you in the band. And I said, and I knew they had sidemen. And I said, Danny, I don't want to be a sideman. It just doesn't seem like the right thing to do, He said, no, we want you as a principal member of the band. So, and I went, well, that's a different story. What do you see me doing? He said, well, to start with, we want you, you know, I know you play some guitar, so there's some things you can play guitar on, but to start with, I got a feeling Robert's not going to be able to handle Foster's piano stuff that well. And I think you can. So, and I went, yeah, sort of. I'm not as good a player as David, but I can copy a little bit, you know?
David Foster.
Well, he's such an incredible musician. He's said that all the records he's made, he's really played most of he's played all the bass, all the keyboards on it. So he just, I mean, when we cut Will You Still Love Me, man, that's like a very intricate, crazy, great piano part, very classical, you know, classical music, you know, piano.
Number
and
3
I watched
hit.
him. What's that?
Number 3 hit.
Buddy, right? I watched him kind of like just blasting through it to kind of, you know, learn it to how he wanted to do it. They rolled tape and it's one take. That piano part, I watched him cut top to bottom. He didn't fix anything, man. So to see a guy do that, and that's what was so great about vocally. Again, what was so great about that experience was that from that point on, I worked with some producers who think they got to be these, you know, heavy-handed bully kind of guys. I laugh at them and tell them, you don't understand, man. My entrance to this thing was with David Foster, and we had no problem. So you can't scare me, man. So let's relax and get some work done.
2 of the guys were talking to somebody and said, we hate what David Foster did to the band. What David Foster did to the band is he took everybody's bank account and went boom. Oh, you hate him for that? Come on, give me a break. You know, it was a really good era. There was some really, really great music. So he kind of was really angry at the band for what these 2 guys said, but it kind of landed in my lap. And at one point he said, man, I'm really pissed at you. I said, what for? It was on a telephone call. He said, man, because of that. I said, I never even knew they did a remaster. They didn't even tell me there was a remastered record out. I had no idea it was out there, let alone anybody saying something like that. And they call me a rookie. That's, you know, if somebody wants to think that, that's one thing, but you don't put it on a record. We hate what the producer of this record did to the band. It's like putting out a motor oil, say, be sure to buy this motor oil. It's going to blow your engine up. You know why?
It's like the documentary, though. Unfortunately, I think a lot of people left the documentary, and I mean, I contacted Danny right after that. He says it's too fresh, man. I can't talk to you right now. And he says I want to, but I might say something I'll regret. And then his manager contacted me and said, hey, man, it's too soon. We just, you know.
Yeah.
So
yeah, believe me, I got you. You know, it's you know, Peter, they were saying, well, you know, Peter wanted to do a certain way, and he wanted to get all the rest of us involved in the Hall of Fame thing, and they were going, no. And when Danny got up to talk, I mean, the first name he mentioned was me, and you could see behind him Robert going, oh God. They took that out of the you know, he mentioned Lagier, he mentioned Chris Pinnock, he mentioned Chad Sanford, he mentioned David Foster, he mentioned all these people, and they just clipped it, you know?
really,
Yeah.
that's too bad.
I don't have any idea. I don't think so, because it's just people have that locked in their head. You know, they just have that locked in their head. That hey, what are they trying to do? It's ruining one of those old songs. But I guess they were trying to establish they're the new Chicago now, and that's fine. You know, it's their choice. But there's a surprised, neither pleased nor displeased. I think it sounds very good. I've also heard the album, which I think is very good. It's not the song that I would have thought they would have. I have no idea why they picked that one. I'm sure they have some very strong reasons for it. But you know, there's 3 or 4 other things on there that I think are going to be real big hits for them. You know, there's a song on there called Niagara Falls that I think is a hit. There's a song called I Believe. I think it's a hit, and so there's a couple other things on there too. So hey, you know, it was their choice, and whatever it is, it's a good album.
Point of the game, I said, well, what else? What do you see me singing? He said, well, how about Make Me Smile? I said, I'm into that. I like that song. Color My World. I went, let me get back to you. So I sang that for a while, and eventually Robert said, I got to sing it now. So I mean, that was sort of the beginning the beginning of the usurping of whatever space I got. I mean, we had a hit. It was an AC hit, number one AC hit with Glenn Ballard and James Newton Howard that was called "Here in My Heart." Remember that song? It was a big record, and the band took it off the set when it went from number one. It went that week after that. It went to number 3, and they took it off the set. I was going, it's a little bit of a slap in the face. At some point in the game, I went, no matter what I do, it's, and I don't think they were, I don't think they were real happy. I mean, that when Ron Nevison came in for a meeting, I don't think they were real happy with Nevison going, I want that guy to sing it.
As a kid, when you're thinking, I'd like to be whatever, a rock star, I'd like to be larger than life, I realized I've gotten exactly what I could handle. I walked into something that's iconic, that is virtually impossible. And you better be at a certain level to pull something like that off. There was no fanfare when I came in, like no big announcement. And that's the way it should be. It's a logo. And as I've done other interviews, and they say, of course, it's not the same guy, but it is an extension of what that band is. And that's why it worked for over 30 years. And when I had to go home, I just love the fact that there's no big, now, the fact that there's no quote unquote announcement, is leaving things open for people to start kind of manufacturing ideas. But, that's the other thing, John, that was so great, is that like part of the price of admission is that if you have to move forward from something like that, there's going to be that area where people might get a little goofy, and they did, fans. It was really strange where, and I get it. Some people are really upset because they're wondering, I want an explanation. It's like, the explanation's out there, and we went through a lot of tough times, man. A lot of tough, not just the in-laws, but a lot of loss. And, and so it was called, from 23 years old, you've been in the spotlight in a certain sense, not a superstar, but in a spotlight where you have to like really be careful of a lot of things, what you say, what you do, this and that.
How did you navigate that? How did you navigate?
It was easy, man. I'll tell you, because again, with a group like that, and the fact that there really wasn't a super focused spotlight, it was it's a family and a team and well-oiled machine, and walking into like, dude, you're going to make a record, and suddenly your voice and your image and likeness are at the top of the charts. And that's the funny thing too, is that it was comfortable for me. If I was a guy that was like literally my name and focus out there, I think I would have handled it, but not like this. This was easy to be in this, this backdrop of a logo. And it's like, yeah, man.
Did you ever meet Jason?
Yes. Well, actually, I met Jason years before I got with Chicago. One of the bands that I was in the 90s was a band from Florida called House of Dreams. And in 96 or 97, we got a deal with RCA Records, and we went to LA and recorded our first record with Keith Olsen at Goodnight LA Studios right there in Sound City Complex, which is no longer there. Jason was longtime friends with Keith Olsen. I don't know if you're familiar with Keith Olsen, but he worked with Fleetwood Mac, Ozzy, Whitesnake, and a lot of big 80s groups. Anyway, one day we're in the studio and Jason pops in for a visit. Oh, Jason Scheff from Chicago. And he brought in this CD they were putting together this collation of artists doing a Zeppelin tribute. And he did Stairway to Heaven, all vocal. Every part was a vocal. The drums, the bass, the keys, the guitars, the vocals. Everything was done with his voice, multi-track. It was phenomenal. So we sat and listened to that. And then, he stayed for a little while, and that was my first time meeting Jason. And Chicago was big in my life, especially in the 80s was the time that I was really getting into music. But I remember hearing all the 70s stuff on the radio as a kid. But the 80s era was big for me. And then when Chicago 18 came out in 85 with Jason, loved that record. I was a fan of Jason. That was actually the first time that I actually saw Chicago live. They came to town and I went to the show. It was killer, you know, and I loved the way his voice sounded on record, you know.
If someone would have whispered in your ear when you were there, by the way, you're going to replace that guy, in a million years, would you have been able to?
I've thought about that before. That would have been weird, you know, if someone would have said that. But I remember seeing the show, how vividly, the first time seeing Chicago live. But no, that would have been weird, you know.
Jeff Coffey had mentioned this to me, and he had said that one time he was standing in front, and there was this woman in the audience looking at him. She would have none of that because she looked at him and she went, "That's not." I don't know if she thought it was Jason or Peter. I hope she thought it was Jason because Peter had been long gone at that point. And
yeah,
he just said that for him, and I'm a fan of bands continuing. I would rather there be a Chicago living today, going out performing Chicago songs than and because people always say, "Well, it's not Chicago since Terry left." I'm going, are you going to discount all that body of work, like going way back? Because it has nothing to do with taking anything away from Terry Kath. Nothing.
No.
But I'd rather there be a Chicago still performing their own songs.
Thanks for saying that, John. That's huge. That's huge. You know, and I get what Jeff means. You know, and I've got to say that I am big fans of all of the people that came before me, all my predecessors. And I tip my hat to each and every one of them. All really talented guys, good guys. You know, I really wanted to say that during this interview with you. I wanted to make you aware, and the people that listen to you, that, you know, from my perspective, I have nothing but good. You know, I love Jason. Jason's like a wonderful human being, incredibly talented. And I've never had the opportunity to meet Peter Cetera, but I've always been a big fan. I often talk about his performances and his use of economy. And when I do master classes, I do a lot of vocal coaching. And Jeff's a great guy, a great dad, a great performer. Got nothing but good things to say about these gentlemen, each and every one of them.
And it happens in the journey camps, and a little, not as much I found with Toto, but it's still there. There's this amount of there's bad apples in every group. There's people who are not going, they're malcontent maybe. They're not, I don't know where their lives have gone, but to go up and to attack someone. And there are some people who do what I do and do a lot of that. That must have been a difficult time for you.
Oh yeah, it was strange because, you know, I lived in this little insular world, you know, where kind of go to the recording studios and, you know, kind of around professional musicians. You walk in, you do your thing, you sign your contract, you leave, you know. It's kind of a little bubble, you know, and it's kind of sheltered, and, you know, people don't make comments, you know, before, of course, the internet and, you know, all of that stuff. Yeah, it was odd and strange and disconcerting and upsetting at times because people would find a way to sort of get to me and get at me, you know, and yeah, it was, I wasn't expecting it. So it was a bit of a rude awakening, I guess. But I mean, I guess it kind of goes with the turf now. I like the way that Steve Lukather, you know, spoke of it at the beginning of his autobiography. You know, he addressed it right away. And when he said, you know, that the worst thing that he could do was to respond. And he learned quite quickly that the best approach was really not to react to it at all. Because there's just no way you're going to make everybody happy. You can't please everybody, you know, and you're filling big shoes. And, you know, I got to be honest with you, in the beginning, I had my wrist slapped a couple of times because, you know, I've developed a style over the years and got a little bit excessively, I'm going to use the word interpretive with the way I was reading some of the material. And, you know, I was approached a couple of times and they said, well, you know, don't do that. Or could you not do this here and there? Because I was embellishing a little too much. And for me, it was about finding a fine line about sort of, you know, being myself, but also honoring those moments that people really want to hear in the songs. You know, these are important things to people. These songs are meaningful, you know, in people's lives. So, but every time that happened, and it happened 1 or 2 times, maybe 3, over the course of the first year, I would always, my response would be, well, thanks for pointing that out to me. Thanks for reining me in. And then the response back would be, yeah, we want you to, this got to be fun for you too. So, we like what you're doing, please continue to be yourself. But so we found this middle ground, which is tough to find when you're, like I said, when you're filling these kinds of big shoes. These really iconic performances is what they are.
I hope you enjoyed that. The interview with Peter Cetera was right after he left Chicago. He was promoting his second album. He was on top of the world. Jason Scheff was done just a few years ago, as well as Bill Champlin, Jeff Coffey, and Neil Donnell, I do believe, was probably the last person I talked to. I went online, and I didn't like the fact that a lot of people were crapping on Neil Donnell, who is an amazing singer. His voice can go everywhere, and he fits in Chicago really well. I'm asked very often, would I go see Chicago with 3 original members left, Robert Lamb, Jimmy Pankow, and Lee Loughnane? When it comes to Chicago, I probably see them. I really enjoy the band. If you want to leave a donation for us, we'd highly appreciate that, because YouTube has been incredibly unstable in the last 6 months. Some months we do well, others not that well at all. There's a PayPal link at the very top of the description. You can join our Patreon. You'll get early access to our videos and buy a t-shirt with our logo on it. Trust me, you go out on the street with that logo and people will ask you about it. Subscribe to our video. Make sure you click the bell notification, because a lot of people are not getting notified when we release a new video. Comment on our videos, like them, and share them on social media. I'm John Bowden. This is Rock History Music.